Good morning. I extend a warm welcome to all the people who are joining us in the special webinar number 136, organized by the Andean Health Organization Hipólito Unanue Agreement. This cycle of webinars began in May 2020. This year, we are celebrating 50 years of Horas Convo, a very sensitive and significant anniversary due to the difficult times that we're going through. However, as a reference in health in the region, we continue uninterruptedly the joint and coordinated actions with the 6 member countries, Bolivia, Colombia, Chile, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela, thus fulfilling the goals and objectives to strengthen the health of our people. A reference in health, we highlight 3 priority points. First, vaccination against COVID-19 is safe and effective in protecting ourselves and others. The more people who are immunized, the less likely they are become infected. Make sure you and your family receive the second, third, or fourth dose as appropriate. There is no excuse for not complying with the COVID-19 vaccination schedule. Second, the socio-economic and environmental context in Latin America and the Caribbean is a scenario in which hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition have increased. Policy decisions are required to achieve sustainable, sufficient, inclusive, and efficient agri-food systems that generate equal access to a healthy diet for all. Third, climate change threatens life, health, and well-being. However, we can contribute to its preservation from wherever we are, generating social policies and a sustainable development model by joining an initiative in defense of the environment, buying local products and plant-based foods. We can use public transport, cycling, or walking, as well as reducing consumption, such as reusing, repairing, and recycling. It is everyone's duty to restore the relationship with nature. It is necessary to recognize the ancestral knowledge of native peoples who have lived in balance with Mother Earth and practice good living. Well, in accordance with what has been said, today, Thursday, August 25th, we open our virtual doors to discuss a topic of great importance for our region: defenders of planetary health, significant experiences from the Andean region. We invite you to leave your name, organization, and country from which you're joining us through the comment box on the Facebook Live or YouTube Live chat. In the same space, you can leave your questions or send them via email to webinarhorasconju@gmail.com. To access the certificate of attendance to this webinar, as usual, you must fill out a short survey and leave your data in the fixed link found in the Facebook Live or YouTube Live chat. The certificate will be sent to your email in the next few days. This webinar will be developed with the usual dynamics. We will start with institutional greeting and the presentations of our speakers, the active polls, and the space for questions and answers. To begin this important day, I give the floor to Dr. Maria del Carmen Calle, Executive Secretary of Horas Conju, who will give the welcome and institutional greeting. Go ahead, Dr. Calle. Thank you very much, Ruby. Well, welcome, everyone. Planetary health is the achievement of the highest possible standard of health, well-being, and equity by addressing the protection of human life and the Earth's natural system as a condition for the development of this and future generations. The summary for decision makers of the sustainable use of wildlife assessment published in 2022 by the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. IPBES estimates that humans depend directly and indirectly on approximately 50,000 wild species for human health, economy, and culture. More than 4 billion people use natural medicine based on wild species as a central healthcare resource, many of which are an important source for research into the production of new drugs for modern medicine. Despite this, 1 billion species of flora and fauna are facing possible extinction. This definition and the data reflect reality. Nature is a fundamental pillar for global health and well-being, a concept internalized and defended by environmental activists, most of them coming from native peoples, whose comprehensive cosmovision of health includes the importance of harmonious coexistence with Pachamama, our Mother Earth, and is complemented by consistent actions to protect her. In our region, several defenders of planetary health have not achieved the necessary visibility and protection. According to Global Witness, 1,540 environmental and land defenders have been murdered between 2012 and 2020. Of them, 64% were from Latin America. In 2020 alone, 227 environmental activists were killed globally. More than 70%, 165, were from Latin America, and of these, a majority, 39%, 65, were reported in Colombia. According to Global Witness, between 2016 and 2020, 214 environmental defenders were murdered in Colombia. The figure amounts to more than 600, according to the report Cifras de la Violencia de las Regiones 2021 by the Institute for Studies for Development and Peace, which 332 were indigenous, 75 Afro-descendants members of community councils protecting the territory, 102 farmers, 25 activists against mega mining, and 77 members of community action boards. Today's speakers are not only experts in the field of environmental activism, but also courageous representatives who continue to overcome constant threats from extractivists, paramilitary groups, and criminals in the most dangerous country for environmental leaders, a result of years of social, political, and economic crisis. From the Andean Health Organization Hipólito Unanue Agreement, we consider that the visibility of your experiences is an urgent task in the present climate crisis, which is the main threat to health in the 21st century. We thank Rosa Montero, Dr. Leonardo Granados, and you, our audience, to whom we want to pass our conviction that health and welfare of our region and the planet depends on the protection of the. With these opening words, I would like to give you our most warm welcome to this webinar. Thank you, dear Dr. Calle. After the greeting of our Executive Secretary, I introduce myself. My name is Ruby Diaz-Arotoma. I am a public health and global health professional from Orasconu, and I am pleased to be in charge of moderating this webinar. On this occasion, we will be joined by professionals with extensive experience in the subject that brings us together, as Dr. Calle mentioned. After this preamble, we will begin this event with a lecture experience of the Cancuamo people in the defense of planetary health, and we welcome Rosa Maria Montero. Rosa Maria is a Cancuama woman, leader of the Cancuama Indigenous Women's Commission, CMIFAK, Pueblo Indígena Cancuamo, in Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, Colombia. For more than 50 years, she has worked, participated, and built process of community experiences in the cultural, organizational, political, and productive areas of women's organizations in indigenous people, specifically with a network of indigenous women of Sierra Nevada, SEIMACAN. Student of the master's degree in education at the Universidad Popular del Cesar, accountant for UPC, diploma in formulation and management of cultural projects at the University of Bogota, Jorge Tadeo Lozano, UTADEO. Welcome, dear Rosa Maria. You have the floor. Good morning. My name is Rosa Manuela Montero. I'm an indigenous from the Cancuamo people in Sierra Nevada. The Sierra Nevada is made up of 4 indigenous peoples, the Kogi, Arhuaco, Wiwa, and Cancuamo people. In this way, I'm very grateful for such important invitation to the space where, as it has been mentioned, there is a need to be in that harmony with Mother Earth so we can have a real health, good living as human beings. And now I'm going to go on to my presentation. Can you see the screen? Yes, go ahead. All right. Well, as I mentioned, we as indigenous people of the Sierra, we have this term of planetary health, that balance that should exist between the material and the spiritual world. This is balance and harmony. Everything that exists for us is alive here in the Sierra Nevada people. If the ancestral territory that was conceived since the origin law, there are many sacred spaces that represent everything that we have in nature. As I mentioned, everything that's alive or without life, such as minerals or animals, plants, and those sacred spaces to which we connect, in which we come to them in a spiritual, where we do some harmonization rites to pay, heal, and repair and nourish those places. That means that we, as peoples, we ask permission to our mother to do that process of planting, to have enough rain, good harvest, to have health, to have a real balance with access to justice. All of this, we do it from these spaces and sacred places. This ancestral territory, as I mentioned, because it's delimited by many sacred sites that connect among each other between the sea, the lakes. So all of this is our ancestral territory, that organization from the creation. Since it was dark, and it started to get organized in that way, where this important topic of the sites of this sacred mesh that assigns us the responsibility to take care of it, to protect the mother and protect those sacred spaces that have this black line, which is an imaginary perimeter around the highlands where many points, the sacred points, connect. As all ancestral territory has, like all sacred spaces, has several dimensions for the management of the balance with all the elements of nature. So there is a real good living, so we can do adequate government, health, for a good community life. We need to be in that harmony and balance with our Mother Earth. In terms of physical dimensions, which is the old sacred spaces composed of our territory, where we as indigenous people, it's not only what is alive, but also the material, the immaterial, what's above in the universe, what's below the soil, underground. All of that is alive for us. And in this territory, we get all these sacred elements together. We also have the environmental dimensions. On another level, sacred spaces have bodies are alive. For example, some rocks represent life because these are codes that provide us messages, or our sacred spaces have a specific function for the environmental, ecological, or life-producing spaces protection. As I mentioned, when we as indigenous, we do some harmonization rituals to ask permission to our mothers and fathers in order to carry out all those our own government functions, or for the implementation of health topics, and to have access to. There are animal and plant communities that are parts of the sacred space, and there are even spaces where there are very sacred animals that we need to care for because they are part of planet care. In sacred sites, there are also places that protect these animals or sacred beings that exist in our environment. We have spiritual dimensions too, where, as I mentioned, the spiritual dimension is where those sacred spaces I mentioned, they strengthen those life principles, the ocean, the mangroves, the different species, ecosystems. All of this somehow are an essential support to have that harmony. These spaces have connectivity among each other, as I mentioned, with the material world and the spiritual world for us as peoples from the highlands. Here we have, right. Well, the dimensions of self-governance, self-development, and knowledge. As we mentioned already, for us, the sacred spaces connect with the human being and its dimensions. Each space has its cultural functions related to life cycles, self-justice, self-government, the work of the elderly that we call mama, our elderly who are wise and spiritual leaders, our traditional authorities that provide us guidance, and from this spiritual topic, we can have a real exercise for justice, and we can have adequate development from our own practices of community work. And we also have those ancestral materials. We've spoken about the sacred spaces that include different types of materials that are produced there. These elements and the natural systems that produce them are an comprehensive part of sacred spaces. These elements may be elements of protected or endangered flora or fauna, or elements produced by mothers and fathers in sacred spaces, which is why these plants and animals are valuable and should be preserved. Already mentioned that there are some animals that we need to care for and protect. We need to provide them food because they're living beings that need nutrition and also help protecting us. Here I would like to share a quote that was collected in an instrument of information called Cruci Canquamo, which is an indigenous people bulletin where we indicated that the Sierra Nevada is a sacred house. Here began the human family. She is father and mother. The natural laws were left in the Sierra Nevada in charge of the mamos, who keep them peacefully, and that the younger brothers should know and respect them, so as not to violate the sacred house and the rights of the older brothers. It is the great antenna that receives signals from the parents, and everything that exists in it are manifested the effects and causes of the actions that occur in the universe. We have indicated Cancura, those sacred spaces, where we indicated that the Sierra Nevada is the heart of the world because we see the flow of those energies, and there are interconnected spaces from the Sierra with other spaces throughout the sacred world who precisely care and protect Mother Earth. I would like to share this map with you. This is the Sierra Nevada. in Colombia. Here this is Colombia. This is the map of El Cesar department. The Cancuama people are in El Cesar department. And in this point here, we have the community of the Cancuamo made up by 12 communities. You can see we have a government structure as a Sierra Nevada indigenous people, some commissions that are very important, the Health Commission, the Environment, Development, Territory, Human Rights, Organization of University Students, Youth Organizations, the topic of women that is so important. We have been doing an important exercise of recovering those ancestral practices in productive issues where we have experiences in productive such as planting products such as corn, such as banana, which are products from the local products, and through those practices, we're doing an exercise of recovering those ancestral practices, for asking for permission to our parents and preserving the territory when we are working on the land. In some occasions, we burn areas in a controlled fashion or very small areas, because around planting, we do environmental measurements to preserve that area, and together with that sowing, we have fruit trees and preservation trees in those spaces. This is a topic that we are working as a Cancuamo people, and in order to do that sowing, there is a control of those areas so we can continue with the preservation of those territories. We were organized as a Cancuamo group in the resolution 012 of 2003 issued by the Impora, and we have approximately 24,000 hectares. And we have been promoting and managing that territorial recovery through sanitation that we're carrying out and increasing the protection. As Cancuamo people, there's an intercultural health model where we have been working very closely with the elderly in those communities who have knowledge of traditional medicine. We are aware that we need to recover and our own practices and strengthen them. What we usually do before going to Western medicine, we work at the health, our own health topic. We visit the traditional doctor, we visit those spiritual sites and health sites where we carry out those rituals for healing or protection. So in the case of the midwives who, before going to see the Western medicine, there is an organization at the community level, and this goes hand to hand when, for example, when for pregnant women, and to do when women is going to become pregnant, we have to that permission to Mother Earth for that child that comes to the world is healthy, be a person that comes with no difficulties. So even before conception, We ask the Mother Earth for permission and we carry out those rituals with a woman who rubs or a woman who's a midwife with those controls at the community level. Well, those principles and foundations of the self-health model, the law of origin, as we mentioned, are all those principles and foundations in that order of the creation of the world as origin, what was created in the principle, how it was conceived from the spiritual. So health is also conceived from there, in the individual, in active. All these practices are carried out in those territories. And to work with these health issues, we have been working in the recognition of that health indigenous model, recognizing that the Western health is also needed as a combination of both medicines to guarantee that harmony, and so we can have a real autonomy exercise of people. I mentioned that ancestral knowledge is the essence of our existence, spirituality, thought, word, advice, the knowledge of the territory and the human body, the management and use of natural elements and traditional elements to care for life, the sea, crops, plants, animals, stones, among many, the treatment and healing of diseases, the times and moments of life, the traditional solar lunar calendar, to the wise and knowledgeable elders to ensure the cultural permanence as a Cancuamo people. As Cancuamo people, we are in this effort covering this ancestral spiritual practice for all the topics I mentioned, for health, for feeding, for access to justice, on education, for education. All these practices are being recovered because we are aware that without these practices, we cannot have that sovereignty or that self-determination as a people. Well, here we have a political, organizational, cultural component that I have already been discussing. We have intercultural services and programs where we have both services, our own medicine and Western medicine, training, research, and information, where we're doing training process and why it's important to recover the plants and the medicinal plants, how to use them, how to preserve them, how to incentivize the sowing of those plants. We're doing an exercise of training, and we also have our own IPS for health. We, as Cancuamo government, we have control on the company called Cancuama IPS. Well, I think I already spoken about this, and as you can see, if you see this graph, we have coordination and complementarity of health systems and models. We have how we coordinate those of these two systems, the traditional and Western medicine systems. So this territory, there is a community, we have the sacred sites, we have our wise and knowledgeers of these ancestral knowledge, and this is linked to all the services provided by our health company with the services network. They go hand by hand with some coordination of these two. Here we see traditional medicine and Western medicine. In traditional medicine, we begin with a consultation with the mamo. In the mamo, in the spiritual traditional consultation, sees that the person is quite ill, it's sent to the general practitioner. As I mentioned, the midwives, they accompany the pregnant woman since she becomes pregnant, and they also alert to the birth of the child because the child has some body elements that are going to be collected for a ritual with those elements that women have from our one body of the women that are used for those harmonization rituals and payments to Mother Earth. What are the challenges in the current context? Well, Colombia is a world power of life because of the diversity of ecosystem for what we have as a Colombian territory with the land of life because of its great diversity in vegetation, in the flora and the fauna. We are also rich in rivers that go through the country, and they interconnect to provide that strength as Sierra Nevada, where the Sierra Nevada, from there, many rivers, many sacred rivers are born and maintain that lung of life. This dialogue, this government-to-government dialogue, we as indigenous people, as I mentioned, we have a government structure where there is a coordinated dialogue with the national government. Recently, Leonor Sarabata was appointed the ambassador, the UN, on representation of Colombia in that important space, and she's an Arawana indigenous woman. And another person was appointed, she's in Vera. She was appointed in victims unit. She's an indigenous woman, and that make us strength to continue with this, working with these women to a process of community work where they have been promoting rights defense projects, environmental defense projects, human health, following this conflict that we have suffered as people from the highlands. So this is an important struggle. Climate change. As indigenous people, we have contributed precisely to minimize this issue that we have globally with pollution, burns, that this imbalance. We, as indigenous people, have been working not from now, but for many years before in defending and preserving and protecting life, the environment, and this is a policy as indigenous people, and more if when we are from the indigenous people from the highlands in trying to protect and to know how to govern. And this is precisely in order to have total peace, because we cannot think that peace is only, in the case of Colombia, the absence of weapons and armed groups, but peace is also this. How can we live in harmony with the environment on our territory? How can we be respectful with the environmental issues? Also part of peace, because if the indigenous people cannot live in our spaces in the way we live, we won't achieve the real. If we do self-practices, which are producing what nourishes us, of doing our backpacks and all the textiles, and to have our own education and to self-justice, we will, if they don't let us do that in our territories, we won't have this real peace. So here we talk about that total peace, this comprehensive peace.
También nuestros retos son seguir participando en esos espacios.
We also have the challenges of participation in the national government spaces or regional spaces, those local spaces where women somehow have been making progress. That's Canquama. They recognize and visualize the role of indigenous women at the local and regional level, and strengthening the governance in the indigenous territories is another one of our challenges in the current context that we're going through in Colombia. And this is the new era of thought and dignity. This is a picture. Our president, Gustavo Petro, before his inauguration, he visited Sierra Nevada in our territory, because he knows that that respect to Mother Earth is that we need to start to precisely achieve the real peace, so we can have production of life in our territory with adequate health, adequate education, and good nutrition from these places, from these sites, listening the advice of the mamos. Here we have mamo. We call mamo in Sierra because they provide guidance that support us in all these rituals and traditional practices of our own. In that way, I would like to finish my presentation.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. We are grateful for the intervention of Rosa Manuela Montero, who spoke about the cosmovision of the Canquamo cosmovision and their practice that include respectful interaction with the ecosystem that protects the well-being of the community, but also the planetary health. She also shared about the progress made in representativity and international activism of the original peoples of Colombia, historical efforts, mitigating climate change, and promotion of peace and recognition of women from the indigenous people. Finally, she also mentioned that expectation for the future with this new opportunity towards a new image, dignity for all.
Manuela, reiteramos el agradecimiento.
Manuela, thank you very much.
Y le invitamos a permanecer en sala. Al final, realizaremos un diálogo en respuesta.
We'll have a Q&A session responding questions from the participants. Before continuing with the next lecture, we would like to greet all those who are connected and have joined us from several spaces. We have the participation of the country Bolivia, Cuba, Ecuador, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Peru, Venezuela, Paraguay, and El Salvador. Institutions that are with us today from those countries are the Ministry of Health, the Peruvian Red Cross, the Peruvian Air Force, the Maternal and Child Perinatal Peruvian Institute, the Cancuamo Indigenous Group, the Network You Decide from Bolivia, the Comas ACET, and the National University of Chimborazo. Next, to introduce the environmental law experiences, we extend a warm welcome to Dr. Leonardo Granados. Leonardo is a lawyer from the Universidad Cooperativa of Colombia, a specialist in environmental law from the Universidad Externado from Colombia. He is currently director of the San Silvestre Green Corporation, environmental and human rights defender. In his professional practice, he has been dedicated to the strategic environmental defense of protected area, endangered species, and victims of environmental impacts in the Magdalena Medio region. Likewise, he has advised some municipalities and the Senate of the Republic on environmental issues. Career as a social leader started in 2004 when he participated in the Municipal Youth Council in the formulation of public policies to promote the right to a healthy environment, free of atmospheric emissions, harmful to health, and denounced the company Ecopetrol SS for air pollution with catalysts in the Barranca Bermeja refinery. In 2015, a legal battle began against the environmental authority and the ASEA company Riva for the illegal location of a landfill and leachate contamination of the San Silvestre swamp, source of human supply in the municipality of Barranca Bermeja, giving a favorable ruling by the Constitutional Court through sentence T227 of 27. Likewise, he has defended the right to a healthy environment and the way of life of fishermen, victims of environmental crimes of environmental pollution with hydrocarbon deposits and damage to natural resources, achieving in 2020 the principle of opportunity in criminal matters and restoration of affected areas after the environmental contingency Lizama 158, known as one of the greatest environmental damages generated by Ecopetrol. As a columnist of Corrillos magazine, he won the prize for Best Opinion column awarded by the government of Santander in the Luis Enrique Figueroa Rey Departmental Journalism Contest. In this struggle, he was declared a military target of illegal armed groups with death threats, which is why the state provides him with a permanent security detail in order to carry out his duties as environmental defender. Welcome, dear Dr. Leonardo Grados. You have the floor. Thank you, Dr. Ruby. My most greetings to the Andean Health Organization. I am happy to participate in this seminar and would like to share our experience in environmental strategic defense from our corporation. And I have divided this presentation with important experiences of the many that we have performed, which have chosen three to share how these defenders of environmental in this will protect health and public health because all environmental impact affects it. I will be sharing with you the experiences so we can illustrate you. I would like to indicate, as Dr. Ruby mentioned, I cordial greetings to all the participants of the all countries. I'm very pleased to participate in this webinar, and I will go directly into that topic in order to share this first defense that we started in 2015 from our organization. Environmental justice is one of important mottos, and one of the most difficult battles was precisely the Rediva landfill, located in a protected area known as that guarantees the preservation of water, wildlife, and we selected this defense because precisely this corporation, San Silvestre Green, is born to protect the most important source of water of Fortuna Barranca Bermeja and guarantees water supply. This presentation is going to be shown with images and tell you all the violations and corruption based in criminal behavior. This image that you see here is a wetland that was a crime against the environmental authority, and who through a resolution of 2014 provided an environmental license in a protected area. This has been done because it also goes against significant species. In particular, this is the most sensitive area of the American jaguar that comes from Mexico all the way to Brazil. One of the most sensitive areas is this San Silvestre area between San Lucas Highlands and the protected area of San Silvestre. As you can see, this is water all over the place. The law in Colombia establishes that you cannot generate a landfill at minimal distance, 500 meters from a water source, and you cannot build a sanitary landfill. And this is the case for Barranco Bermejo. They built a landfill in the middle of a protected area with an inadequate technique, 10 meters away or 18 meters away from hydric sources and wetlands. They started to solid waste disposal with no perimeter channels, the solid waste and an open pit. So the leachate, the solid waste is highly polluting because there's no classification of waste. There's a mix of all the organic residues, diapers, toilet paper, and that is, and the light bulbs and the new technologies for energy savers that, as you know, have 20% more mercury. And the seriousness of this crime is that started cutting trees. It was a beautiful watershed, and 10,000 trees were cut down. Together with this illegality and the environment and the corruption with the environmental authority, we realized, because the farmers made a claim that this company legally produced an even greater crime. In the next picture, you can see this red line. That is the limits of the environmental license, the limit to which they couldn't go through. They obtained license for this area, and as you can see, they went over this established perimeter established in the license with invasion of ecological areas of importance, being this a protected area. And they were doing it after, outside from this license. They built a levee. They brought earth with waste and do a 4-meter levee, and that generated a water recollection and the severe damage, as you can see, is the wetland just went rotten. This is the corridor of the American jaguar. But here we have some species that are endangered, and this gray mouse, which is located in this area only. This is also a corridor of another species that's endangered, and the other effect of this serious action generated another crime, which is the damage to natural resources and environmental pollution, because they illegally started with pumping leachate from and pouring them into these hydric sources. Unfortunately, this affected areas where we collect water for human consumption, and that is why we ask some claims at the judiciary system, and the prosecutor's office ordered the detention of the head of the corporation with two criminal processes. But when the lab tests were performed of this pollution, it was established that the hydric sources had iron, arsenic, vanadium, and mercury, and these heavy metals are harmful for human being and accumulation of fish. Unfortunately, we started with someone who's part of the environmentalist, a pediatrician, Dr. Tessie Blanco, being the head of the neonatal unit of the Magdalena Clinic. He started to diagnose severe cases of two diseases. One, anencephaly, cerebral injury, and the 7 cases in less than 1 year, and 10 cases in animals between cats and dogs that consume this water. And also, we detected a disease known as hot disease. There are 200 cases reported in the world, and unfortunately, in Barranco Bermeja, we have 15 diagnoses to date. This process, we didn't know that the owner of this company was one of the members with or coordinated with the paramilitary forces. And when they asked the detention of this manager, they threatened against my life. Unfortunately, I survived an attempt to kill me. This has been an intense defense. We are still with this. And following this environmental pollution, we did a protective action to protect health and the right to health and collective environmental rights. And when the collective rights are violated and affects fundamental rights, the protective action. I lost in first instance. There was an appeal, and the Constitutional Court selected my claim, and I obtained a special commission of this court with experts from the institutes, Taxi-Coaxi, so that we could evaluate the affections made in this area in Parque Bonito, because the pollution with leachates was being done in this area and in this area, both sides. And in this area, there's a ravine that brings natural water to the school of children. So the children start having gastrointestinal condition with rash and problems, and that generate a violation. So we were able to have a favorable sentence of the Constitutional Court. Before going to that ruling, I would like to show the severe damage to the environment, because this is a harm to natural resources. It's not irreversible, but it has Then structural effects of the endemic species that are endangered, of the American jaguar. In addition to the water pollution, they kill their source of food with fish and other animals. So they start to attack the cattle. So now the cattlemen are fighting against this animal because they kill many of their livestock. So this corruption led to an environmental conflict, and the environmental authorities responsible, and instead of guaranteeing the human right, the environmental rights. But in that investigation, we discovered that behind that was Ecopetrol. Ecopetrol, this entrepreneur that we know that is one of the most important contractors of the oil company, is in charge of moving land. And the idea was to damage this area because Ecopetrol would like to operate here in Magdalena Medio. But thank God, and the new president said this no-go, it's a no-go for this destructive practice of the environment. So we were finally, this is the tank where they pour this leachate to the water source and polluted the wetlands, and this water ended up affecting the wildlife. It's the most difficult defenses that we have, but it's great satisfaction because we think this ruling, the T227-2017, you can Google it and put sentence T227 of 2017 in Colombia, and you have this ruling. Today, this ruling indicates we cannot pour leachate. That have to establish a leach treatment plant, and in order the construction of an aqueduct for this population to guarantee the water supply, drinking water supply, and it demands the environmental authority to apply the law. They have to close this landfill because of a systematic violation to the law and the Constitution for a criminal environmental crime on a systematic violation. And this sentence, and they were asking for this company to go to jail, but now it's been purchased by a French company called Biol, and they had also committing some damage to this protected area. And this is a conflict that's been going on for 7 years. And now we demand the compensation and the closure of this landfill, so it can be located in a different area following a study. And it demonstrated how illegal it was, and we are in this, we can enjoy a struggle so we can enjoy water of better quality and protect the health of all the population. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to go to a second important strategic defense, the largest case of Colombia to damage to natural resources that we had the United Nations present in Barranca Bermeja was the damage of Lizama 158. In this picture, you can see this is the bore, the hole generated by an operational failure of Ecopetrol. This Lizama 158 well, it's 300 meters away of a failure of the casing of this was broken, and due to a geological fault, there was infiltration of the product, and it do more than 40 meters of the jet of hydrocarbon, and unfortunately it reached the water sources, and this was in the protected area between the DRM, two protected areas very close to each other, approximately 10 kilometers of this landfill that I mentioned before. Lisama 58 generated, this is the Candy Muerto ravine, and Lisama were polluted, as you can see, from side to side with a dark spot of 34 kilometers of environmental pollution. Approximately 3,600 species of animals died and 12,000 fish approximately. A severe damage to natural resources. Also, from the irresponsibility, they didn't have any contingency plan. They didn't recognize the protected area, and the company generated a severe impact. The fishery for the fishing for this, we're calling the Black Week. And during Holy Week, the community consumes fish, and when they fish the product had oil taste, and as you can see, this is a polluted area, the flora, the fauna, and the fisheries. The ecological damage is one of the most severe things of this environmental impact, because among the 12,000 species that died, we had what we call in scientific terms the natural organisms that repopulate. So there's going to be no repopulation in this area, and that is going to affect the way of living of the fishermen of this Sogamoso River. 1,100 victims and approximately 157 farmers that have been affected. It's ecological disaster. We went to trial for claiming this damage. We had a very strong battle, and we had to fight against Ecopetrol, and we won in this hearing to show the responsibility of this company. And Ecopetrol, for the first time in history, accepted that they had made a crime, and we came to the principle of opportunity to do an anticipated termination of this process, where we should apply the principle of transitional justice and repair. We demand the indemnization to the fishermen and farmers, a restoration of the hydric source, and today, after 2 years of approving that principle and achieving the process of cleaning, this has changed following this action of strategic defense, because this also put at risk the drinking water to this community. This is how we found the dead fish in the Sogamoso River, and a massive ecological disaster in Barranco Bermeja. This is the Sogamoso River with this dead space. Although they put barriers, all the barriers were overcome, because there were more than 2,000 barrels that were lost between water and oil products. It's also an important issue that precisely the Ecopetrol paid all these fishermen an indemnification of 9 months of salary, minimal salary, an agreement that we achieved between the prosecutor's office and the victim's representative for compensation of this damage, but we also demanded that they had the opportunity to work during the cleanup, because they know the basin. And we did a very nice exercise together with the fishermen. It was to review point after point and clean it from oil products. And thank God we were able to clean and put it in better conditions. It's slowly recovering. We start seeing the fauna back again. And Ecopetrol had to invest more than 30,000 million pesos to protect this area, this protected area. Well, I'm going to finish with another defense, not in terms of pollution, but in terms of factors for pollution, and how the Ecopetrol company started to do constructing oil locations in wetlands without getting the permission. This is well 79A and well 80. They went against natural resources in this area. This oil area of Barranca Bermeja is an oil area, and it has the largest refinery in Colombia, where they process 260,000 barrels of hydrocarbons. We also have a criminal claim because of contaminating rivers. But today we just want to finish with this crime, which is a more recent one, because here they're violating an international treaty and a treaty for biological diversity. You can see these are water sources. They built this location on the wetland without the permission for intervention following the environmental law, and we were able to suspend these operations, these continuous operations, and this well 80, this oil location. In 2020, we request the suspension of the work following the local law because they didn't have the permission to operate. Ecopetrol, unfortunately, harmed this area here, in this lower portion. It went through this area and came out this way, what we call Caño Llavito. This is a biological corridor. As you know, they have this marine cow, which is a species who's in danger. And as you can see, they also violating environmental terms, the hydric ground. In this type of areas, the minimal distance is 30 meters after the lightning. In this case was 10 meters. You can see that next to this location, there's water. And this is another crime, which is a damage to natural resources. Unfortunately, the director of this corporation, this new director, also went to trial because of omission, because this area established as environmental protection area, and it has also been established as an aquifer area with good quality water production. And Ecopetrol and the environmental authority did not do any preventive measures. They drilled the aquifers, 6 machines and pumping stations that put the underground waters at risk. And it was established that Cano Llanito in this area are water for human consumption. So the Corregimiento Llanito aqueduct is going to collect water from this water source. In Colombia, the environmental law states that when the government or the state establishes that a source is for water for human consumption, there can be no mining activities. There was a crime committed here, and we opened 2 sanctionary process, and we had to go put on trial the water authority because they deleted from the geographical information system, they deleted this. They don't see this area on the blueprints, and this is currently in the prosecutor's office because Ecopetrol has to close this location, return it to the government, to the state, guarantee the channeling this hydric source, because these 2 areas are drainages that guarantee incubation area of fish. Here they affect 458 fishermen from this area. These severe actions of effects on the oil industry. As you can see, this drilling are less than 10 meters away. They build them on exclusion areas. As the law states that you have to have a minimal distance of 130 meters to a water source, which is less than 80 meters away. So if we see that if something happens with a spill, there's no time to protect these areas. What oil leak will produce a damage to this area. It will end up with the water supply and will destroy the way of the life of the fishermen. So here we need to do a strict application of the principle of environmental protection, because the Constitutional Court has ruled that when there's a latent risk that may put in danger the environment, health, and a damage to natural resources, this should be immediate, canceled, suspended. This is something that we are requesting in our legal actions, defending the human right to water and a healthy environment, and defending the mode of life of the fishermen and protecting public health of this population. But in addition to that, as I was saying, it violates the plan of preservation of this area that has four specific provisions, and Ecopetrol paid for the study of the plan for conservation. They were aware of the existence of an international agreement with the UN that states that sedimentation, ban in wetlands, with mining and the risk of oil contamination. That is why we're organizing an international action against this company. We are forced to protect and comply with international treaty, something that they are not doing and violating the law. We continue in this strategic environmental defense. This is a picture of how a location puts at risk, and all of this is sediment, this landfilling that ends up in these water sources, affects the wetlands and the water corridors. 15 days ago, we saw a manatee that died, and we are now defending those endangered species. That's one of the lines of actions of the San Silvestre Green Corporation. So what we're looking is to precisely, as an organization, balance with sustainable development, with industrial development, facing preservation of our environment, because the climate change effects are more and more severe every day. We need to start with concrete actions to mitigate climate change. We defend the environment and protect the species, the endangered species, so we can have a harmonic balance between economic development and what has to do with preservation of protected areas, endangered species, and a healthy environment that allow us to have better guarantees of public health for our population. In these terms, I finish my intervention. I would like to thank the Andean Health Organization for this important invitation. Thank you very much. We thank the intervention of Dr. Leonardo Granados, who presented the significant experiences of environmental defense with the landfill of Retiva and the hydrocarbon pollution and the risk of that by Ecopetrol SA. In Magdalena Medio, where the criminal activities of waste management, the allocation of resources, and the lack of social and corruption and decision-making affected several risks for the ecosystems, the subsisting activities, and consequently the health of neighboring communities. Dear Leonardo, we thank you again for your lecture and invite you to stay in the room. After the active break, we will conduct a dialogue in response to the question from the participant. After these moments of learning and knowledge exchange, it is essential to take some time to relax and start a mini physical exercise session while teleworking. The Horas Conju encourages the well-being of those who join us in this virtual session. And in these next minutes, we will exercise with an active pose to stay healthy, combat stress, reduce work fatigue, and keep muscles flexible and healthy. Please go ahead with the active pose. There will be no interpretation into English during the active pose.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, desde cualquier parte del mundo, donde quiera que te encuentres, bienvenidos a realizar esta actividad saludable. Hoy, a través del Organismo Andino de Salud, Convenio Hipólito Unanue, los invitamos a realizar esta actividad saludable. Así que toma tu sillita y nos vamos a sentar hoy más o menos al borde del asiento. Vamos a fortalecer el abdomen, la zona lumbar y las piernas. Así que saca pecho, tus dos manos toman o los apoyabrazos o el asiento mismo, lo que quieras. Cuando estés listo, sonríes, perfecto, y con una sonrisa suba las dos piernas, ya, suba las dos piernas. Así nos vamos a quedar hasta las 8 de la noche y vamos a ver cómo se fortalece todo. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, resista, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, baje las piernas, descanse. Ya se empieza a sentir este calentamiento. Ejercicio número 2. Agarra su silla, saca pecho, sonríe, suba las piernas. Perfecto. Y ahora pedalee, pedalee, rápido, veloz. Usted está encima de la bicicleta. Perfecto, viajando por el mundo en bicicleta, en Bolivia, en Chile, en Colombia, en Ecuador, en Perú, en Venezuela. Hoy pedaleando juntos para lograr favorecer nuestro estado de salud. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 y descanso. Ahí ya se va sintiendo en piernas, abdomen, claro que sí. Bueno, tercer ejercicio. Quiero que agarres tu sillita, apoyabrazos o el asiento mismo. Perfecto, saco pecho, sonrisa que no puede faltar, suba las piernas, perfecto. Cuente, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 y ahora pedaleo. Mezclé los dos ejercicios, perfecto. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, no te rindas, baja las piernas. Ahí se va sintiendo. Esta actividad la puedes hacer desde cualquier lugar. Los que están trabajando, estudiando, bienvenidos siempre desde el Organismo Andino de Salud. Así que agarre su silla, perfecto, suba las piernas y mire, vamos a marcar el abdomen, abajo y arriba. Vamos a hacer 650 de esas, si se puede. Vamos, 10, 9, respire, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bajo las piernas. Ay, cómo se siente, vamos a mezclar los tres ejercicios. Entonces recuerda, sostenemos, luego pedaleamos y luego dejamos las piernas en un balanceo arriba y abajo. Entonces agarro, saco pecho, actitud, sonrisa, prepare la mente y ahí sí el cuerpo, nos fuimos, arriba. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, que sigue, pedale, pedale, rápido, veloz, ágil, ágil. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, arriba y abajo, nos fuimos. 10, 9, respiro, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, baje las piernas, ay, descanse. ¿Cómo se está sintiendo? Se siente la presión en las piernas, en el abdomen, en espalda. Subimos la temperatura corporal en nuestra pausa activa desde el Horas-Conju. Bueno, nos fuimos a agregar otro movimiento porque ustedes son valientes, guerreros, fuertes, guerreras, invencibles, eso es. Bueno, agarre por favor su silla, apoyabrazos o el asiento mismo. Mire el siguiente ejercicio, suba las piernas, perfecto, y ahí donde está el balanceo solo de las rodillas al frente y atrás, respiro, perfecto, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bajo piernas, descanso, tomo aire si se puede, y llegó el momento de unir los 4 ejercicios, ¿listo? Mentalícese, tome aire, agárrese, sonría y no se rinda. Yo creo en usted. Agarro, subo piernas, perfecto. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. ¿Qué sigue? Pedalee, muy bien, rápido, veloz. Energía, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, arriba y abajo. Respirando, 10, 9, 8, si se puede, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, balancee, mire, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 y descanse. Ahí se va sintiendo la energía aquí en todo el organismo andino de salud. Yo veré que estamos marcando la chocolatina, fortaleciendo la espalda, las piernas. La gente de Bolivia, de Chile, de Colombia, de Ecuador, de Perú, Venezuela son los más fitness de todo el organismo andino de salud. Perfecto. Bueno, último ejercicio. Vamos a agregar el último. Mire, suba la pierna derecha. Perfecto. Cuando la tengas bien arriba, estírela un poquito y regáleme 10 círculos con la pierna derecha. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Baje la pierna. Perfecto. Se siente. Y ahora tomo, subo la pierna izquierda arriba. Circulito grande. Entre más arriba se siente más. Nos fuimos. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bajo la pierna, descanso. Momento final, agregamos toda la secuencia y terminamos. Entonces, no se rinda, mentalidad hasta el último minuto. Bueno, agarro la silla, sonrío, perfecto, mentalizo, tomo aire si se puede, subo las piernas. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pedaleo, rápido, veloz. Gigante, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, que sigue arriba y abajo. 10, 9, 8, respire. Eso es, el que se quede quieto hasta las 11 es el refrigerio. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, arriba, balancee las piernas. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bajo las piernas, suba a la derecha, estírela. 10 circulitos, vamos a sacar pierna. Eso es. Muy bien, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cambie. Pierna contraria, arriba. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bajo la pierna y descanso. Muy bien. Subimos temperatura corporal, fortalecimos hoy piernas, abdomen, eso es espalda. Un estiramiento para terminar, soltar un poquito las tensiones. Agarre su silla. Perfecto, mire, saque el pecho hacia adelante, mire hacia arriba, proyecte el abdomen, la espalda hacia adelante, nos estiramos, muy bien. Perfecto, organismo andino de salud con Beri Politunanue, hoy trabajando todos juntos para traer hábitos de vida saludables. Muy bien, ¿cómo te sentiste en nuestra pausa activa del día de hoy? Así que los animamos a seguir haciendo ejercicio de manera divertida. Así que desde Loras Conu les mandamos un abrazo fraternal para todos. Muchas gracias. Chao, chao.
Esperamos que hayan disfrutado
We
de esta
hope
pausa.
you have enjoyed this active pause, and now we will start a dialogue based on the questions raised by the audience. We invite the speakers to turn on their cameras. During the course of this webinar, some questions have been left for us, and we will do our best to answer most of them. Question for Rosa Manuela. What coordination mechanisms with other organizations have been implemented to maintain, share, and spread the ancestral knowledge of the wise men and the wise people of your community? Well, at the level of the highlands, we have the Seimaca network of indigenous women, where despite that we are in the highlands, each people has its own dynamics. We've done some partnerships and we are working some joint topics in precisely this topic of rescuing practice in the sowing processes. The Arhuatas women are leading a very important process in the care and protection of the environment. As women, we've been looking at those experiences to include them in our Cancuamo indigenous territory in the same way as we're doing with women at the level of the highland. Also with the indigenous women of the Cauca, who've been also doing a significant effort. And these practices are not only focused to the production and nutrition topics, but also in the subjects of health. The Cauca peoples have been working strongly with the protection and traditional medicine. Thank you so much for your answer. The following question is for Dr. Granados. Could you share with us the included components in the concept of environmental justice? I couldn't hear your question. Could you repeat that? Could you share with us the components that were included in the concept of environmental justice? We have established for our organization the components of environmental justice 3 action lines. Major action lines: defense of protected areas, protection of endangered species, and the defense of the victims of environmental impact. We have called the lines of environmental justice, but the components in terms of we're talking about access to justice. We're telling the government, Colombia requires expert judges in the environment with international treaties in order to make those principles that are included in our constitution. Because we don't have judges in this republic, and it's an important component of environmental justice and the environmental jurisdiction in Colombia that will allow to guarantee, as is being done with this constitutional protection action, that we can have immediate justice, because the prevention principle looks for immediate action. So when you put a popular action, if it's a protective measure is not approved, there's going to be a ruling 2 or 3 years after, but the damage already is there. So the principles are dead letter. So at this moment, it has already been, as it has improved in Colombia, there's an important component of environmental justice, but with this new government. Another important element that is important for us in terms of a component of environmental justice is precisely the administrative function of the state in how they can sanction. The preventive measures should be an instrument, a coercive instrument, so those who goes against the environment can be, the law can be applied immediately and have a protection for the environment, and avoiding is preemptive to protect the right to health, because all water pollution or land pollution or air pollution affects and results in diseases. So when I start the first action of defense against the Barranca Bermeja defense, they were dumping 40 tons of catalyst and resulted in respiratory infection and death in children, and infections, polluted water that has produced a damage of bioaccumulation in pregnant women with mercury, with deformities in the fetus and anencephaly. So this is should have an important preventive and administrative component. So the environmental authorities can be diligent in their sanction. This is a fundamental component because it allows also to determine the criminal responsibility of those who violate it. It is important for us also as a component in terms of environmental justice, the recognition of direct and indirect victims, the human being as a central axis. But for us, this is very important. It has to be precisely the essence of the protection when we talk about protecting the environment. It's not just the human being is a central axis, but it will allow a balance between the existence of nature where he or she lives in order to protect this human being, the rational human being, to guarantee the protection to their health and life. We have made a major struggle where we want to defend the victims of environmental impacts, because the one who produces environmental damage, it has to do not only clean what they contaminated or polluted, but the civil code in Colombia and in Latin America establishes those who produces harm to another one or to do some reparation. So it is important for us to recognize the victims as a person that is affected by these criminal actions or some arbitrary actions of impact against the nature. These are the three important components that we consider that are needed in our country. And also in terms of justice, we talk about jurisdiction, but also we think that the prosecutor's office acts here, and they include a new crime, the ecocide, a systematic harm of who's generating damage to the environment. It has a more aggravated behavior. And we thought that international criminal law has to include the crime of the damage to natural resources as a humanity crime, a crime against humanity. Because we're talking with a risk, putting 300,000 people at risk. This is very serious when we consider that the state, the international, speaking from the International Criminal Roma Treaty, should consider the crimes against the environment should have the category of crime against humanity. This is the national discussion, of course. From our corporation, we consider this a fundamental component of environmental justice, so we can make progress in these large negative effects that we are suffering today as a product of climate change due to these anthropic and generalized actions by industrialized countries and companies who destroy the environment and put the life and health of people at risk. Thank you for your response, Dr. Granados. Now we have a question for Rosa Manuela. What protection measures are offered to the environmental leaders in the Cancuamo people? Could you share example of protection of the life of environmental leaders of the indigenous people of the Sierra Nevada? You can't see me. I have a problem with my video camera. Protection measures. We have leaders in different topics that we defend. There is our own protection, which is done from the spiritual by carrying out harmonization rights, protection rights with our mamos and the elderly who guide us so we can do an effective reform in this exercise in our territories, in the sacred sites. at the level of the highlands or the sierra. This is our my largest protection. Another protection from the level of the state, like those protection guarantees offered to people when they have been threatened, where they are subject to a collective protective system, but those measures are not sufficient to guarantee a life of the human being, because we are exposed with this violence that lives day after day, that something may happen. But our largest, greatest protection is the one that we provide ourselves, the one that we have in our territories from this spiritual practice. Thank you for your response. We continue for a question for Dr. Granados, and is related with the question to the Rosa. What reforms do you consider to be important to strengthening the protection of environmental leaders? It's a very important question, Ruby. In my experience as environmental leader, I'm alive thanks to God, because the access to state protection for leaders has many weaknesses. In particular, in Colombia, we need a reform. So it's the Ministry of the Interior who leads this protection as it was before. There was a more agile way of providing protection to leaders of preventive type once they identify the risk factors. In a way, as they are qualifying risk today in Colombia, generates a very slow allocation of systems. And this is one of the countries with the highest rates of murders of leaders. And in our corporation, we are the ones the most at risk. Not too long ago, we found out that Ecopetrol did a study, and we were #1 in their list because the head of safety for Ecopetrol was sentenced last year because they were coordinated with paramilitary forces. And I say this because we need to realize that in the risk analysis for leaders, we require that if a person has proven activities against a company and their companies put at risk their image and their economy, your risk has to be enormous and immediate. For the allocation of a armored detail, it's something almost impossible. If they don't kill you and you survive, then they will allocate the system. And that breaks with the principle to personal security that is considered in our constitution. And this is one of the reforms that the current government should do in classifying the risk according to the role that each leader has. One thing is what an environmental leader and the protection in the territory is. Another thing is what those who have defense actions. The most attacked ones are the ones who have defense actions, and those who are in the land and are facing certain groups. There's things that you need to learn, and there's limits that we're not Superman, but there are some elements of fundamental protection. It's classifying risks that needs to be done in the on-site where they carry out this activity, so we can rate it, because they're offering conventional non-armored cars to some of the environmental leaders that have died, are going on a regular truck, and the glass is not bulletproof, and they end up killing them. So we are asking two things to the president: a reform with a classification of extreme extraordinary risk, and an administrative reform to the state protection units, so armored cars can be offered to those who defend the environment and human rights, of course. but also to end up with this third-party contracting. Team that I have is in the hands of a private company, and they charges the Colombia state by renting the weapons, and they stay with the weapons. And when you see the Colombian government is paying the weapons 3 times their price, so those businesses and political friendships, so few resources that we have are not properly expended, and that doesn't allow to increase the protection to some leaders. What we are proposing is that the government produces weapons. Well, in the mill that produces will provide the weapons to the Ministry of Interior, so there we avoid over cost and have a direct agreement with any company that provides armored cars. Is a leasing with 500,000 pesos per day. That's too much money. The state has a contract where they share maintenance. Because twice the amount of leaders that have protection today can have protection, and we will not be the only country in the world that has the highest levels of attempts against environmental leaders. The most dangerous country of this planet for environmental defense is Colombia, and I know that's true. I have been followed and have some attempts against my life. So we hope that the president has these reforms enacted soon, so then we can reduce the lethal actions against environmental and human rights leaders. Thank you very much for your response. The following question is for Manuela Montero. What are the most important challenges to achieve a better coordination between Western medicine and traditional medicine, together with intercultural health? And in relation to this, what are the most important suggestions of the indigenous peoples in the current proposals to reform the health system that has been proposed for Colombia? Could you repeat the second question, please? Yes, of course. What are the most important suggestions from the indigenous people in the current proposal to reform the health system that has been proposed in Colombia? Well, in Colombia, as indigenous people, we are looking for respect for the implementation of the self-health, because currently this ancestral knowledge is not recognized in terms of the use of traditional medicine. In that regard, Colombia, we want to get the recognition of this health system as it has been emphasized with Decree 1953 of 2014, where it's been currently the consolidation of this indigenous health, where they consider all the pillars and topics with a real recognition of what we do in health. We're still lacking a law in favor of this. We have a decree that is expecting the regulation to respect this policy of indigenous health. Thank you very much. The following question is for Dr. Granados. In different reports and on the basis of your experience, the fact of working in protecting the earth or go against agro-industry and mining extractive measures is one of the most dangerous activities. Facing this reality, what mechanisms can be used to have more people join this cause, and how to include this protected participation of children and adolescents, how to include their voices of that population group that are the most important victims of those environmental crimes. Well, I think that there's an important component. I'll start answering the second part of the question. One of the most severe lack of knowledge generated that only few are doing the environmental education. So environmental education is extremely important together with the ecological and defense of the environment. People should know what are the groups. The more empowerment at the level of education for the population, we're going to have the opportunity that more voices get together in defending the environment. Now, in terms of risk, I consider that we have to be quite strategic. I've learned that the risk minimized to the extent that several organizations get together with a common topic, a collective topic, the risk decrease. Furthermore, I've also learned to be prudent. We know to develop each action strategically, and that has allowed me to make progress. We are now going against several companies in Colombia that are doing this type of activities. And an important component is that we need to visualize in the mass media every action that we do against a company that acts against the environment. This is important because to the extent that I know that they've been pointed out and it's publicly known, they know that there's a direct correlation with responsibility against any attempt. So I write a column in a journal, and also we have been exercising a structured process so we can join efforts in environmental platforms with several organizations against a company, and each organization has a specific action of defense, and that has allowed us to reveal the issue of death threats. This, in the last 3 years, has been very helpful. When we see that one of the organizations starts to be threatened, we go in solidarity to all of them, and we contact the police from the state, the government, because we need Colombia to change in that regard. It is inadmissible that defending the human right to water could be a potential element where they can go against your right to life. And this is one of the strategies that we have been implementing. Thank you very much for the answers by both speakers. We thank for the questions, and we were not able to answer all of them, but we will consider them to define the topics of the following webinars. We value your participation interest, and to close this space, I would ask the speakers to leave us a message or final comment in 1 minute in the order of their interventions. We will start with Lisenciara Montero. I would like to thank for the invitation to this important space where we have shared the defense of planetary health, where we can guarantee the sustainability of this interrelation of the territory that is sacred fabric of nature and culture, because it is the basis of life. Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Granados. Well, I would like to thank the Andean organization for this invitation. I think that Latin America needs to be united as a bloc, not only economic bloc, but also in the environmental defense bloc. In recent years, we've seen severe ecological disasters, and those who help to balance these loads are the ones who do the environmental defense and the work that you're developing. Wonderful in terms of protecting the right to health. So today we feel happy from our organization that we've been invited to share our experience, and that will allow many people decide to go and work on these defenses. That way we can have this world achieve what was ratified with sustainable development and protection to the right of life. A big hug to all of you. God bless you. Thank you. We reiterate our gratitude to our excellent speakers, Manuela Montero and Leonardo Granados, and to all the participants who attended who accompany us week after week, to the Horas Conu team, and to all those who participate in this activity, which has been possible thanks to the commitment to Andean and Latin American integration. I give the floor to Dr. Maria del Carmen Calle to close this webinar on behalf of the Andean Health Organization Ecological Agreement. Go ahead, Dr. Calle. My dear Ruby, Dr. Calle cannot, she's not here, so she had asked me to close this event, and I would like to start by thanking our excellent speakers, Rosa Montero and Leonardo Granados, who have dedicated their time sharing with us their struggle, their experience in this field of the harm on nature and the impact because of the actions of man. This webinar related to planetary health has been extremely important, and I think that we are living with the idea that we can continue to consider that the care of the environment and nature and the ancestral knowledge, and to maintain that balance and harmony to achieve that sustainable development that we all want in protecting the life and health of human beings and other living beings, not only us. We also know that legal standards exist in every country, and they also exist globally, but perhaps we still need to the implementation and perhaps a weak control in our countries so that we start to see actions such as the ones that Leonardo has shown us this morning, from atmospheric pollution and oil spills. All these catastrophes are produced by man, unfortunately, and they get out of control. Sometimes these accidents produce irreparable damages to Earth and living organisms. So that's why we need to learn with these examples and prevent them and avoid them mostly. Unfortunately, all the actions of man affect the environment in some way. It's many times the lack of awareness or conscience that makes us act irresponsibly, and we don't measure the consequences of our actions. So we know that those types of actions are the important cause of environmental impact. And the best way to reduce this impact is to be aware and to think in the consequences of what those actions are going to generate, and to see how we do our best effort to protect the environment and prevent that it affects us as persons. This is quite a significant topic and a priority for our institution. And we have an Andean plan for health and climate change from 2020 to 2025, although it was drafted with a representative of the 6 member countries, Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela. So the Andean Committee of Climate Change and Risk Management has important strategic lines that call to work in a coordinated manner with interdisciplinary, intersectorial efforts, with surveillance on risk and research to have incidence in public policies, work on mitigation of the climate change. With this webinar, we can visualize this and put this in important topic back in the agenda that calls us in an individual and organized to the citizen and to the public and non-government organizations, companies, speaking about that important responsibility that's so needed, that should be significant in every activity of those companies, with the government and at every level. We've been very motivated and sensitized to follow the examples of those who have spoken today. Unfortunately, while damage is still present, we'll have defenders, and we should all be defenders, because if this is, we should consider the harm we're doing and become aware that we are damaging our home, our house, where our generation and coming generations are going to live. This topic should still be current for a long time, and we need to continue working in this way. So in this, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of you, those of you who follow us every week in these activities, to the team of Horas Conju and Ruby, and those who have worked in this occasion. And we invite you for the next Thursday, September 1st, to the webinar about primary health care to comprehensive care, which is going to be quite interesting and important. Thank you once again. See you soon.